Hello again, folks. Martin Lane here from Orange Technology, and in this video, I want to talk about living within your means. Living within your means. So this is a topic that, quite frankly, is not new. If you Google YouTube on living within your means, you'll find a lot of videos about this topic. But it's especially important for those of us working in the IT field and working in the tech field. So I'm going to look at this from a personal perspective, and I'm going to look at this from a business perspective too. So living within your means. So from a business perspective, what do we mean by this? So when we're talking about living within your means, we're talking about not growing your expenses larger than your revenues. Pretty simple concept. I mean, this is a this is business. Very simply put. It doesn't matter if you're in the tech industry or any other. If you sell bananas, the rent on your store cannot be more than how much money you make selling bananas every month. It's pretty simple. Otherwise, you lose money, right? But I see so many people in the technology industry that with their businesses, they live beyond their means. And I don't really understand why. I would argue that I've seen this more in the tech industry as opposed to any other. And part of that, I would say part of that comes from the type of people who are in this industry, the type of people who get into this industry, and a lot of times the attitudes, right? So for example, there in my industry here locally, in the IT industry, I acquired a competitor, my largest competitor, who happened to be the largest provider in my area about a year ago. So it's just under a year ago we acquired this competitor who was kind of the big fish, so to speak. And it is very interesting because it's been quite the learning curve. Quite the learning curve. There are a lot of things, a lot of lessons learned, a lot of things that took place, and I'll talk about those in other videos, of course. But one of the things that really came to light was how much expense was going on. Basically, how much living beyond your means was going on with this competitor. So, when we took the competitor on, we basically tried to run it the same way for a little period of time, get an understanding of what was going on, and then start making some changes. And there were some crazy expenses. Salesforce. For those of you who know anything about Salesforce, there was a $10,000 US agreement per year, $10,000 per year, US dollars agreement to use Salesforce. And it was for one sales guy. One sales guy. I think the intent was to have a second, but even still, two salespeople in an area, in a market area where there's a total of 38,000 people. 38,000 people. Two sales guys. Only one, but possibly two sales guys. And you're signing on for $10,000 a year for Salesforce. Hey, Salesforce is a great product. I have done the trials, I've done the demos, looks like a great product. I'm sure it operates like a great product. I'm not saying anything against the product, but do you need that product to be able to effectively run your sales and manage your sales in an area my size? Right? And that's one of those things. You start breaking that down. The US dollar is worth more than the Canadian dollar. So roughly, that's about $1,100 Canadian a month you are spending just on this SaaS, right? Software as a service platform. That's it. Then on top of that, there was additional fees. I don't remember the exact number, but it was about 700 or so US, 700-800 US again for trouble ticket system. Okay, so there was again this SaaS, software as a service, software platform, trouble ticket system, cloud managed, cloud hosted, so nothing on premise, that all of the technicians logged into and logged all of their trouble tickets for tracking purposes, for billing purposes, and all of that. And that was again, if you If you factor in the conversion back to Canadian dollars, it's close to $1,000 a month for that. So you're talking about if you just look at Salesforce and you just look at the trouble ticket system, it's $2,000 a month. $2,000 a month you're paying just for that. I mean that's that's an entry level technician's wage after tax. It'd be a little bit more before deductions, CPP and employment insurance and all that fun stuff. But I mean, net for the employee, that's an employee's wage, right? So I mean, when you're looking at that, what's more valuable, this sales platform and a trouble ticket system? And don't get me wrong, you need to have a trouble ticket system. But do you need one as complex as the one that was being used? And I won't mention the one being used specifically, because I know there's a lot of competition within the trouble ticket ecosphere for cloud-hosted services for that. So I don't want to mention any names. Again, no problem with the solution. It was actually a really powerful solution, complex. It could track all kinds of things. Interestingly enough, it could also track sales. It could track sales opportunities. Something to think about. But yeah, so the those two things cost as much as an entry level technician's wage if you bring somebody on. So I mean, when you factor all of that in, what's more important to have? These tools, which really you can do without the one, and you can find an alternative, a much cheaper alternative for the other, for your basic tracking, and then hire a staffer, or you have these tools and you can't afford to hire the staffer. And I mean, there were so many other things. Cleaning. I mean, there was almost another $1,000 a month in cleaning fees for the office. I mean, if you factored in, there was an abundance of phone lines. It would appear as if the old ownership of the competitor. I'm not sure what the thinking here was. In my head, when I think about this, there's only two reasons why you would do this. So the company before had about a complement of staff between 6 and 8 staff, roughly. Sometimes it was a little more, sometimes a little less. It depended how staff levels were, but it was somewhere between 6 to 8 staff, right? So there were 12 phone lines going into the office. Now, there weren't 12 phones in the office to answer with, let alone 12 staff members to answer 12 calls at once. So one of two things took place. Either the ownership did not want there ever to be a busy signal or an immediate voicemail. It's one possibility. Or the other possibility is they weren't exactly sure how many lines they had. So which one is it? I'm not really sure. I honestly don't know. But I mean, this is another one of those things. When you looked at the phone bill, this is $1,000 phone bill, right? This is $1,000 a month in phone costs. So, I mean, you factor in Salesforce, the trouble ticket system, phone line charges, again, above and beyond what you can physically answer because you don't have enough staff to answer all those lines, let alone, I would argue they're not saturated. I've cut it down to two lines, and it's rare that those two are in use concurrently. But anyways, you've got $1,000 in phone costs, and you've got another $1,000 in cleaning costs. It's $4,000. I mean, that now is a senior technician's wage. Right? So again, it's living within your means. You have to pick and choose what makes sense to spend your resources on. Money is just a resource, right? I mean, if you think of your monthly revenues or your annual revenues as a resource, it is a resource. You have this much of a resource, okay? And you have to decide how you're going to spend it. You can't spend more of your resource, or you shouldn't. You'll You'll go in the red, you go in the negative, you go in the debt, et cetera, et cetera. But you shouldn't spend more. You can technically, but again, that's not a long-term solution, and that's not viable long-term. You have this much resource. What are you going to use it for? And the whole premise about business is if your revenue is this much, your expenses should be as small as possible, because the rest of that is your profit, right? That's how much money you make. So again, I mean, for me, cleaning, for example, I clean the office. We have more than one office, so we have one office that's a public office that people can drop computers off at, and that office I clean every single week. Once a week, I do a deep clean of that office, take all the garbages out, I clean everything, I clean the desks, dust everything down, clean any glass, any windows, that kind of thing, vacuum, all that stuff. A few times a year I shampoo the floor, I purchase a floor shampooer, so I do it myself, etc., etc. I do that once a week. I spend several hours, generally every Saturday, and I do that. Could I be doing other things? Yes, I could. Absolutely. I've got a small family. Quite honestly, I could be spending more time with them. There's lots of other things that I could do and I would rather do than clean the office. That being said, I save a bunch of money every month. I save a lot on expenses every month by cleaning it myself. Now, that leaves more of a profit margin. That leaves more that I can, more resources, more money that I have to work with on other things. I can give staff raises. I can send staff on training. I can pay for this. I can pay for that, which quite honestly pushes my business further ahead and gets me further down the line than just having a clean office. So again, it's one of those things. One is living within your means, and two is within those means, you have to understand and you have to prioritize what makes more sense to spend your resources on. So that's on the business side. Now on the personal side, I see this as a huge problem in this industry. There are a lot of people, business owners, employees, people working in the industry, et cetera, who simply can't live within their means, right? So, I'll be honest. I actually started off building web pages. That's actually how Orange Technology started. It was actually under a different name back then too, but that's how it started. I was going to make web pages. And I actually got a call from a client on the first piece of marketing ad mail that I put out to the businesses in my area. I got one phone call, and it was actually not for a web page. Somebody asked, "Could you fix a computer? Could you fix computer problems?" I said, "Well, yeah, sure." I mean, I've worked, I've been building my own computers and installing operating systems and troubleshooting drivers and all that nonsense, since I was a teenager. So, quick answer is yes. Yes, I can fix a computer. I can work with operating systems. I can, troubleshoot issues, all that kind of stuff. So I said, yeah, sure I can. Okay, how much do you charge? And I told him how much I charged. Quite frankly, it was super, super low, way too low. But okay, this is what I charge hourly. I should probably come and have a look at what you've got, and we'll go from there. So okay, I headed down there. And, and I had to look at everything, and it was fairly straightforward. I had a user into Active Directory, mapped some network drives, set up this Wi-Fi router or access point, et cetera. Fairly straightforward, nothing special. And, I made a few $100s. Literally, for the next year, okay, the company didn't grow very much. I had the one client. I think it was about 8 months later. I want to say, well, it was a little longer, 10 months later, somewhere around there. Shortly before a year later, we got our second client. Okay. So, and now I will fully admit I was not being very aggressive in marketing. I was not pushing anything. I had one client. I focused on that one client. It was just me. I made sure that, they were getting the best absolute service possible. I made sure it was as perfect as possible. And I was responsive and all that stuff. So So again, one client. Just before a year was up, two clients. As you can imagine, again, the hourly rate was not very high. I'm not going to tell you guys what the hourly rate was because, well, it's slightly embarrassing. It was very cheap, very cheap. I didn't really have a lot of overhead. I was working out of my house at that point. I did have another office, a second office, but it was kind of in behind another building upstairs on top of a shop. Yeah, so this is more just like an office I could go to. It wasn't something where you could tell somebody, come visit me at my office. They would never find it. So the overhead was not that much. But again, I only had the one client and then the two clients. So literally for a year, for over a year, I took home a few $100s a month in pay, right? Like I'm pretty sure I was below the poverty line. I did not make a lot of money. So based on that, I adjusted my lifestyle to reflect that. I didn't have a lot of expenses. I didn't owe money on a car. I owned a car. It was actually a relatively new car. Right? My where I was living didn't cost that much. I didn't go out to eat at gourmet dinners all the time. I pretty much ate at home, and et cetera, right? So I didn't need a lot of money to live. I was able to live without going to the red, without borrowing, without being in a deficit. Okay. Fast forward to now, I'm the largest provider in my area. I've got a number of staff that work for me. Quite honestly, I do a lot less of the actual IT work now, as opposed to more the administrative and managerial duties. We have four company vehicles. As I've said before, 2 office locations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So fast forward to now, obviously, I'm not making a few $100s a month anymore. I am making more than that. But, and this is the important part, obviously my lifestyle is a little bit different, but I am still living well within my means. If my paycheck was cut in half next month, I can still survive. I can still live. I don't have to go borrow money. I don't have to go, I need to get a job. I'm going broke, right? Like, I can still survive. And I think that's important to think about and important to practice, because so many people don't live within their means. And again, this is across the board anywhere, but especially for those people who work in the technology industry. I see it all the time, right? I mean, I've seen it. This isn't my experience, but I have seen a friend of mine that also owns an IT services provider. He had hired a staffer. This guy worked at help desks and here and there. Had a basic concept of troubleshooting, things like that, but wasn't an expert, wasn't a CCIE or something like that. And he brought this guy on, and entry level wage, it's nothing special. He took it upon himself to start training this individual and start working with him. And throughout the months and year, this staffer of his grew in his skill sets and expertise and all that, and obviously just started getting raises and started getting paid more. And then what my friend, who's the owner, said he noticed was this person, as he was getting paid more and as he was getting more hours and overtime and weekend work for projects and appointments and such, his lifestyle increased. So he said when he started, this person drove like this 200,000 kilometer 25-year-old Honda, right, from the 80s. This was this old car, barely made it to work and back. His first raise, he went out and he bought a Camaro, brand new one. Okay, yeah, fine, whatever. Then when he got another raise or two up, he went and he got a house. He bought a condo. It was a condo. He went and bought a condo. Okay. And then as he got another raise, he decided to take a really long holiday, right? Then when he came back, he bought a boat and he started buying some of these toys. And one day, he came into work and he looked extremely stressed, and he was he seemed to be sweating a lot and things like this. So my friend said he brought him to his office, said, hey, I'm just curious, are you okay? Is something going on? And and the person said, well, I'm not really making as much money every month anymore. The owner said, well, that's strange because you've been getting raises, so I haven't taken your raise down. So I don't really understand. And the person said, well, we used to be doing deployments every single weekend, and now, it's sort of like every other weekend, if that. The owner said, well, yeah, I mean, deployments, yeah, we had a bunch that were clustered up and planned for, and there were some larger ones that spanned over a couple weekends. And, it's that stuff's not guaranteed, right? I mean, you're paid to be here, 8 to 5, and that's it. So if we have extra work, that's great. By all means, you'll get paid the overtime to do it and all this stuff. But, your actual work's 8 to 5. So this is actually what your salary is. This is the agreement we have, what I owe you baseline, right? Anything above and beyond that is, if we go there, right? I mean, if we have that work. And his staffer said, okay, here's the problem. I bought a car, I bought a condo, I went on this big holiday. I bought this, ATV, I bought, this and this and this toy, and now the monthly payments are so high, I can't afford to live unless we're doing those weekend deployments. Right? And my friend said he just shakes his head and he has to think about it for a minute. And he says, oh man, like my responsibility as a boss is to make sure that you are paid as we have agreed. You are. It's not really my job to give you personal financial advice. That being said, I probably wouldn't buy anything else if I were you. Anyways, what happened, just so you know, a few months later, basically that employee kind of stopped showing up to work here and there, and his productivity just went down the tube. And finally, like he actually didn't show up for an entire week for work, a whole week. Didn't call in. The owner tried to call him, tried to call the employee and ask, what's going on? Are you sick or are you in the hospital or what's going on? No response, no answer to phone calls, emails, texts, etc., etc. My friend had decided, as soon as this guy comes in, like he is gone, I'm going to fire him. I can't rely on him, etc., etc. It's not good for the other staff, etc., etc. And finally, that staffer came in and basically said he'd lost everything. The bank came and took his home. They foreclosed on him. He had to move out. He had nowhere to go. He still had the car, but he was hiding it from the repo people. A whole lot of mess. Anyways, long story short, he was no longer working there, and I'm not really sure what happened to him. But I've seen this time and time again, where and I know this happens all across the board, right? It doesn't matter what industry you're in, this happens all across the board. Many people do not know how to manage their finances. It's just a fact. It's something we don't teach in school, unfortunately. I'm not really sure why we don't. We should be learning about this in grade school. We're not. I don't know why, but I see it more pronounced with anyone working in the technology field, is they live beyond their means. And I don't really understand why, and it doesn't really make any sense to me, but that's just how it is. And it's something you really need to think about. If you really want to get ahead, especially as a technology professional, whether you're a business owner, working at a company, working public sector, working for yourself, you're a consultant, whatever, you really need to live within your means and think about what you're doing with your money, going into debt, things like that. Because if you are careful, and I'm not saying you can't ever buy yourself something. If you want to go on holidays, by all means, go on holidays. I am a firm believer that everybody should go at least once a year on a major holiday. And I don't mean camping 30 minutes away from where you live. I mean flying somewhere, going somewhere warm in the winter, whatever. I firmly believe everybody should go once a year. I do not believe that people should borrow $20,000 to do that with. Okay, if you don't have a ton of money, there are ways to do it on more of a shoestring budget. Trust me, I've been there. I have done it. If you are making, decent amounts of money, then you can, do things a little more nicely if you want, or a little less on a shoestringish budget. I shouldn't say more nicely, because you can still have a nice holiday even if it's on a shoestring budget. It's all about how you spend your money and what you do and what you want to do. So, yeah, anyways, I'm a firm believer that everybody should go once a year. I'm not a firm believer that you should borrow a bunch of money to do it. Same thing. Personally, me, I would not go and spend $60,000 on a new car and finance all of it. If I want a new car, if I want to go buy a Mercedes-Benz for $60,000, personally, me, I would want at least half of that paid in cash. That's me. If I wanted to borrow the rest of it. And I'm not even saying I would borrow the rest of it or be willing to borrow the rest of it. Quite frankly, I would be happy to pay 75% cash and borrow the rest of it. That would be acceptable to me in my circumstance. But lots of people will just go out there and borrow everything they can, and they put nothing down. There's all this zero down, no payments for 6 months and all this stuff. And really, you need to think about this, and you need to live within your means, because if you live within your means, then you can adapt to a changing environment. I mean, technology is a changing environment, right? I mean, 10 years ago, if you were a phone system administrator, if you administered PBX phone systems, there was a job for you. There was a job for you at medium-sized enterprises, large enterprises. There was a full-time job for you. And all you did was you managed the phone system, right? And the problem with that now is those don't exist anymore, right? I mean, most of the phone systems are now IP-based. They're pretty easy to configure. They just work. A lot of people are using hosted IP PBX solutions. So you have it in the cloud, where all of your extensions are on a system from a provider that's in the cloud, where literally if you want to make a change, you just make a phone call. You pick up the phone and you say, hey, I need another extension, or hey, I need this extension's name changed because there's a new guy working there. And that's it. They just do it, right? So again, if you were living outside of your means, even though you were being paid $70,000 a year to be a phone system administrator, right? I mean, you're getting paid good money, and let's say you lived like right at the limit of your means with that money. What happens now? Because now you don't have a job anymore. And if you do, it's a part-time job. It doesn't pay that much. I would argue you wouldn't even get half of that. Or you're like a phone system consultant, and you have a contract with multiple companies where you come in like for half a day a week and you manage the phone system, and then you go to the next client and that kind of thing. I don't know. That might be something you could do. But again, are you making that same amount of money? Because these days you've got to be pretty cheap. Even if you're coming in half a day, you've got to come in pretty cheap to make it worth it for that company not to just outsource you completely. So again, if you're living well within your means, you can adapt out of that changing environment. You can say, you know what? I've got this job position doesn't exist anymore. This isn't the future. I need to go train in something else. So you go and train in something else, because again, you're not worried about, how am I going to make the rent this month? How am I going to pay for that car? How am I going to pay for this, and this? If you're not worrying about that, it leaves a lot of time and flexibility for you to go and do other things. For example, learning a new skill. So you can now move out of, I don't know, let's say the legacy PBX administration, and you're going to move into, I don't know, cloud app development or whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. But it gives you that flexibility, and living within your means also means that the excess money you make, you are able to save. And even if that's not much, like I'm not saying you should save half your paycheck, every other week or every month or whatever. even if you save only a little bit, then you have a bit of a cushion, right? I mean, if you save, $100 a month for 10 years, that's $12,000. If in 10 years your job doesn't exist anymore and you need to adapt and you need to go retrain in something different where there is a need, $12,000 in the IT field actually isn't that bad. I mean, if you want to go learn web development or I don't know, HTML, you want to become a cybersecurity professional. I would argue there's more jobs in cybersecurity than there are in phone system administration these days. I'm not saying there's a ton of jobs in cybersecurity, but I would say that there are more than there is in phone system administration. If you have, $12,000, that's a good chunk of money that you can train with. I would argue you could become a pretty good cybersecurity expert, professional, with $12,000 cash at your disposal. So, these are all things to think about and to factor in. And again, if you're a business owner on the business side, you've also got to watch that you're living within your means, that your expenses are not larger than your revenues, and that your expenses are reasonable, right? It just makes sense. And again, this isn't just for those of us in technology professions. This spans across every profession, every person making money out there. But again, I mean, my experience here in the IT field is I see this a lot with IT people, and it's unfortunate because a lot of good businesses go under because of this kind of thing. A lot of people who quite frankly are good-hearted people who weren't trying to scam a system or anything like that. They get into trouble and then they can't afford their lifestyle anymore. So that's really something you got to think about. So yeah, that's all I had for this video, and we will see you guys next time.